Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I'd like to inform all parties that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to Omari Wooden. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. As stated, my name is Omari Wooden with the U.S. Census Bureau. I'd like to welcome everyone listening in on their phones and those following the webinar on their computers to the fourth and last installment of the World Trade Month Go Global webinar series. Today's topic, Opportunities in International Development. This webinar is, as I stated, a final installment in a 4-part series. Hosted by the U.S. Census Bureau, this series was created by your federal trade partners, the U.S. Small Business Administration, and the U.S. Department of Commerce, including the Census Bureau and the International Trade Administration, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation. This in-depth webinar series provides the government resources to help you become a successful exporter, from finding compatible markets, to financing your export program, to understanding export regulations. And even to today's topic, leveraging export opportunities through international development activities. These webinars have taken place every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time during the month of May, which, if you do not realize, is World Trade Month. Each webinar has been completely free, and again, a great way for you to understand the resources provided by the U.S. government to you. We hope that if you were able to participate in the other webinars, but we will make sure that we provide that information towards the end of the series today for you to access those webinars that have been recorded for your access. Please remember to go to export.gov, where you can find a lot of other valuable, useful resources, again, from the U.S. government. By the end of today's webinar, our goal is to make sure that you can answer these following questions. What do U.S. international development agencies do? In which parts of the world are U.S. international development agencies active? And how can U.S. businesses work with U.S. international development agencies? So one of the things that I'd like to remind everyone on the call before I turn it over to our speakers is we want you to know that we will have a question and answer session at the end of today's webinar. But however, keep in mind, throughout today's webinar, we will also have our chat feature live and available. So if you have questions, you can pose them through the chat feature, and we will do our best to get to as many of your questions through the chat feature as possible, in addition to the Q&A that we will have at the very end of the webinar. One thing I would like to remind everyone, for the sake of time, to allow everyone an opportunity to ask questions. One, we will ask that you ask one question, limiting it to one follow-up question, and also if you could ask for the speaker that you're having the particular question, so we can make sure that your question is directed to the person that can assist you with your questions. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our speakers. First, I'd like to introduce Ned Rock-Menino from the U.S. Agency for International Development. We will also have Diane Quabrel, who is the Director of Public Engagement with the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. We also have Allison Germack from Overseas Private Investment Corporation, and she is the Director of Corporate Development. And then lastly, Maxwell Sarpong, the Supervisory Contracting Officer at Millennium Challenge Corporation. So at this point, with all of our introductions, I'd like to now turn it over to Ned.
Thank you, Omari. Ned Rock-Menino here from the U.S. Agency for International Development. Thank you all, everyone who has joined today. I want to take a minute or two to explain what USAID is. We've discovered, outside of our usual suspects and traditional partners, many in the private sector are unfamiliar with our work, who we are, what we do, and some of the challenges we are working on. So first, we have the USAID mission online. On behalf of the American people, we promote and demonstrate democratic values abroad and advance a free, peaceful, and prosperous world. In support of America's foreign policy, the USAID leads the U.S. government's international development and disaster assistance through partnerships and investments that save lives, reduce poverty, and strengthen democratic governance, and help people emerge from humanitarian crisis and beyond, progress beyond assistance. Next slide. So next slide. Our agency, we have a workforce of approximately 9,000 working in more than 100 countries at any given time. You see here on the map, largely focused in the developing world, significant presence in Africa and Central and South America, and throughout Asia, even in parts of Europe, Eurasia. Our work includes everything from agriculture and food security, to human rights and governance, education, environment, and global climate change. We're working on global health broadly across the globe, water and sanitation issues, working in conflict and crisis areas. We host a robust U.S. Global Development Lab, which I'll talk about a bit later, and naturally we provide avenues to economic growth and trade, both for the partners we're working with overseas and for those here at home. And that is an item I will highlight in much of the misconception is we work solely overseas with overseas partners. The reality is much of what we do is done in tandem with U.S. stakeholders, whether that's a large business like a Coca-Cola or General Electric or Corteva AgriSciences, or whether that's a small business. One of the better small business examples I can cite is Trace Inc., a small agriculture product manufacturer in Oklahoma, Adair, Oklahoma. If anyone is familiar, it is a town of about 800 in eastern Oklahoma. They have one of the most innovative solutions towards stink bug control, which is actually a significant issue in Europe, Eurasia, specifically in East Europe and Georgia. A connection made there, able to partner with a U.S. private sector firm to solve a global challenge. So next slide, please. Again, much of what we do advance U.S. national security and economic prosperity. We demonstrate American generosity and promote a path to recipient self-reliance and resilience. Again, providing humanitarian assistance, promoting global health, promoting global stability, empowering women and girls, and catalyzing innovation and partnership. Next slide. Some additional detail into the sectors USAID transforms. Some details with providing humanitarian assistance. We stand with our communities. Administrator Mark Green often says we are not offering a hand out, we are offering a hand up. Promoting global health. Investments in global health protect Americans at home and abroad and strengthen fragile or failing states. Also promote social and economic progress, typically the first building block in supporting a strong enabling environments for U.S. firms to explore overseas. Supporting stability. Again, despair is dangerous. While poverty does not cause violent extremism, it creates conditions that extremists can exploit. Our efforts empower women and girls. Key initiative, you may have seen this from the White House with the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative led by Senior Advisor Ivanka Trump. USAID is supporting women and girls and protecting life, peace, and progress cannot be sustained without women's equal access to opportunities and participation in their country's institutions. And again, catalyzing innovation and partnership. The future of international development is enterprise-driven. This is an area our administrator has been very strong on, ensuring that the private sector has not only a place but a significant role in crafting and responding to these grand humanitarian challenges. Next slide. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the development journey. The USAID has been promoting the journey to self-reliance. Again, this is the hand up versus the hand out. We want to ensure that we provide development assistance to help partner countries on their own development journey to self-reliance. Over the long run, our goal is to have countries going from recipients to partners to donors, says our administrator. We have been speaking, Administrator Green and the agency have been speaking strongly about this since day one. We want to ensure that the activities we are leading, the challenges we are responding to, that we leave countries far stronger than we engage them initially and turn recipient countries into strong partners and eventually donors themselves. So let me jump ahead to the next slide. And I can spend some time discussing where USAID specifically engages the private sector and why we are here today. Looking at some of the examples here, I'll start with the private sector engagement policy. This is a strategic approach, an agency-wide strategic approach to international development through which our agency consults, strategizes, aligns, collaborates, and implements with the private sector for greater scale, for sustainability and effectiveness of development or humanitarian outcomes. We are working to ensure that the inclusion of the private sector is prevalent in all of our activities. We are constantly seeking new ways to engage our private sector partners. Let me run down a few other examples where we are trying to get a better relationship with U.S. private sector stakeholders, where there might be some engagement points. Starting with the new partnership initiative, which was just announced at the beginning of this month on May 1st. It allows USAID to work with a more diverse range of partners and provide more entry points for organizations to work with the agency. Specifically, we are trying to target and include those who are underutilized and those who have never worked with USAID before, seeking specific opportunities in areas of interest: global health, with our Center for Faith Organization Initiatives and elsewhere, making sure we are leveraging the expertise, the insights, the non-governmental innovation of private sector partners and others that we just haven't worked with before. If you are one of those who has not worked with us but would like to learn more, we have a number of mechanisms to engage. But under the umbrella of this new partnership initiative, we would certainly enjoy starting conversations and taking your interest and sharing it appropriately with accordingly with the appropriate bureau. So we also host a Trade and Regulatory Reform Office, a little more traditional. We work with governments, the private sector, and other donors to expand our overseas markets, create economic opportunities, and build strong, stable partnerships. We are constantly looking to build public-private partnerships. Our chief mechanism for this is the Global Development Alliance, which is a model for building public-private partnerships focused on market-based solutions to deepen USAID's development impact. In catalyzing investment and resources, we are seeking multi-stakeholder coalitions to mobilize resource and action commitments. We have a few examples I'll run through. We're also targeting supply chain investments and seed grants to catalyze and de-risk market entry. We have a number of other programs, provision of first loss or concessional capital to de-risk investment funds with social impact where needed. We have investment prep services. We invest in entrepreneurial ecosystem development, such as entrepreneurship and diaspora funding platforms. We host grand challenges and a program called the Development Innovation Venture Program, which link R&D and innovation to follow-on investments in supply chains. I will note the U.S. Global Development Lab, which provides long-term capital to innovators and entrepreneurs through this venture capital style grant competitions. We are constantly seeking to partner with impact investors, incubators, accelerators to provide financing and technical assistance to entrepreneurs. We work with corporations and others to take proven innovations to scale, and we also are open to vetting good ideas. Our approach is we want to ensure that we are open to have the initial discussions on how we can leverage this innovation, whether it is a large-scale Fortune 100 firm or whether it is two guys or girls in a garage with just a very good idea that we can field test and see if there's an opportunity to scale. We are constantly working on mobilizing local private capital through our Development Credit Authority, partial loan guarantees. We partner with and build capacity of local pension funds and institutional investors. We have a few other engagement avenues as well. And we are also constantly seeking to fund shared market research as a global public good, advance knowledge of best practices and evidence in our partnerships and private sector engagements, and collaborate between the missions and our bureaus with you in support of our private sector engagement strategy broadly. So a few other examples. One other example I want to highlight, we also contribute and engage the private sector through interagency initiatives such as Power Africa, which brings together technical and legal experts, the private sector, and governments from around the world to work in partnership to increase the number of people without access to power in sub-Saharan Africa. The goal there is 30,000 megawatts of power before 2030. We're working on generation, transmission, other connections, everything from large-scale natural gas projects to small-scale off-the-grid power gen solar projects. To geothermal. So we are flexible, we are creative, we are constantly looking for new ideas. If your private sector firm has an idea to explore a good avenue to engaging the development space, this development trade, so to speak, we are excited to field good ideas and point them to the appropriate bureau or office, whether the interest you have, the product you have, the service you have is applicable something to a specific region or a specific issue, whether it's something broad. We are excited to field your interest, so please do not hesitate to reach out going forward. With that, it is my duty to now turn over to my colleague at the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, Diane Cabral. Diane is the Director of Public Engagement. And Omari, I will leave it to you to transition slides to the next presentation.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. This is Diane Cabral with the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. Thank you, Ned, for that kind introduction, and to Omari for inviting USTDA onto this call with some important potential partners. The U.S. Trade and Development Agency, which I will hereafter refer to as USTDA, is an independent federal government agency that focuses on export promotion and links U.S. businesses to global infrastructure opportunities. Our primary purpose is to create American jobs through exports from U.S. companies. USTDA is unique as we are mandated to engage the U.S. private sector in infrastructure at the critical early stages when a project's technology requirements and standards are being defined. The ultimate focus is for us to connect buyers and sellers to generate exports. How is USTDA different? Just a couple points here. USTDA only works with nations in emerging markets using the low and middle income guidelines of the World Bank. And USTDA cannot support projects that have no significant U.S. export potential. Next slide, please. To achieve the maximum return on investment of tax dollars, USTDA consistently evaluates our activities to determine which sectors achieve the greatest results for partners at home and abroad. Within each sector, we cover a large range of the industry. For instance, in the transportation sector, that includes aviation, heavy rail, ports, and intelligent transportation systems. It comprises about 25% of our portfolio. For our energy and power team, for example, our folks have subject matter expertise in everything from renewables to power transmission and distribution to coal, liquefied natural gas, and traditional energy and power, and solar and energy storage solutions. The energy sector is about 50% of our portfolio, and then the last sector is telecommunications, which includes ICT or interconnectivity, IT, information technology, communications, cybersecurity, data storage, smart cities, and then access. Occasionally, we do consider projects in other sectors. Some projects have focused in healthcare, water, and agribusiness. Next slide, please. Taking a look at our results, for every $1 that's invested in USTDA, we return $104 in U.S. exports. So our export multiplier is pretty significant at $104. During the lifespan of USTDA, we've generated $66 billion in U.S. exports. And just last year, fiscal year 2018, we estimate that we generated 28,000 new jobs supported by new exports, and just about $5 billion in new U.S. exports were identified in the last fiscal year. We have a success stories page on our website that highlights our successes by state and by country. I kind of picked Illinois as being in the middle of the country. So, for example, in Illinois, $2.17 billion in exports have come from Illinois companies as a result of our work. 206 Illinois companies have gained new business from USTDA activities. About 12,500 jobs have been supported in Illinois by USTDA programs, and we've brought about 600 foreign buyers to Illinois over the years. And these stats are from 1992 when our program started. Next slide, please. Taking a look at our work in infrastructure, we primarily focus in infrastructure and on project development tools. A common refrain that we hear from both investors and host country developers is that capital exists and there's financing, but well-prepared projects are what's lacking. So our project preparation tools fill this critical need by providing comprehensive analysis to bring infrastructure projects from concept to reality. USTDA provides grants directly to our overseas sponsors, who in turn select U.S. companies to perform USTDA-funded project preparation activities, such as feasibility studies and pilot projects, technical assistance and training programs, and other activities like our reverse trade missions. As a government agency, USTDA uses its convening power to host conferences and workshops overseas. Just last month, the agency hosted an airports and aviation conference with decision makers from 8 African nations who met with about 45 to 50 U.S. companies in Durban, South Africa. I wanted to mention this because SBA's STEP, or State Trade Expansion Program grants, could be used to attend USTDA conferences overseas, either the business briefings in the U.S., which I'll speak about in a minute, or an in-country conference. So it's a great way to catch the attention of foreign buyers. I wanted to provide an exhibit or example of a feasibility study in Lithuania focusing on securing energy independence. We put together a feasibility study to identify the best sites for an LNG terminal as part of Lithuania's national energy security strategy back in 2011 with a company based in Virginia, which helped to identify the best location for a future LNG port in Klaipėda, Lithuania. That port opened there in 2014. It began its operations importing American liquefied natural gas, or LNG, providing all of Lithuania's gas needs. And now that port for LNG is importing American LNG to fulfill all of the capacity of Lithuania, as well as additional capacity which is able to move to other nations in the region. So there's several wins here. One, Lithuania was able to gain energy independence from Russia, and they had a diversified energy mix to add renewable energy, and they strengthened their energy policy and energy security and their economy. And it was a win for both U.S. companies and U.S. foreign policy to have a new friend in the region, as well as to strengthen our economic values there. Next slide, please. On our reverse trade missions, just to define those, USTDA hosts foreign project sponsors or foreign delegations, decision makers, which are often comprised of corporate executives, government regulators, and then the investors that come here before upcoming procurements to see U.S. technologies and services firsthand, to take a look at the design, the manufacture, and operation of our U.S. solutions. In the past fiscal year, we hosted 30 reverse trade missions. Roughly, we do about 3 a month, bringing close to 3,000 foreign decision makers to 116 U.S. cities. During the reverse trade mission, attendees are able to participate in what's called a business briefing. The business briefing is what I lovingly refer to as the shopping day. These are one-day mini-conferences that include delegate presentations on upcoming procurements, the tender timelines, and financing mechanisms. Basically, it's speed dating with one-on-one meetings where you get the chance to meet with the decision makers before the procurement is issued and discuss your products, services, and technical solutions. The reverse trade missions as a whole follow a customized itinerary, bringing delegations to travel around the U.S. to see examples of the products and technologies that they're shopping for at work. So basically, it's window shopping. These visits will create market access for U.S. businesses, and it's very unique because it allows a government agency to use its convening power to host a foreign delegation, which has the backing of the U.S. government. So it makes a big difference. Just last fall, we hosted a foreign delegation from the Philippines that was focused on cybersecurity, and it included roughly about 50 government representatives that were interested in making procurements for 15 different Filipino federal agencies, including their presidential administration, their Bureau of Taxation, and their Department of Transportation. So it gives you a sense of how high level these delegations can be. Let me go back to our success story from Illinois that I mentioned a few slides ago. USTDA had hosted a delegation of rail officials from Cote d'Ivoire, taking them to both small and large companies in Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta to showcase American ingenuity and technology and business opportunities in West Africa. The itinerary focused on U.S. manufacturing and the high quality of rail products and provided an opportunity for the visiting officials to see the equipment being used. As a result, 4 new locomotives were purchased from the National Railways Equipment Company in Mount Vernon, Illinois. The win here, the Ministries of Transportation in Burkina Faso, a neighboring country in West Africa, and Cote d'Ivoire were able to celebrate the success for that West African region because of increased rail connectivity and future economic opportunity. This overall investment exceeds $450 billion, and it includes rail replacement, upgraded safety systems, and a stronger rail system with increased capacity to transport 5 million tons of goods over the railway and about 1 million passengers a year. And there's definitely more opportunities for U.S. exports. Next slide, please. So I wanted to provide some ways that you can connect with USTDA. There's a number of links, one that's focused on small business and small business procurements. Our reverse trade missions are almost always set aside for subcontractors who work with USTDA staff to help figure out the best places for the reverse trade mission to focus in terms of industry and location. Also, our trade leads, that's definitely a great link to check out, taking a look at where we have upcoming opportunities. And then upcoming events includes our reverse trade missions, business briefings, businesses and conferences, as well as training that we may host overseas, again, where those STEP grants will come into play. I wanted to spend just a moment to talk about what some of the upcoming activities are. Starting on June 1st, for about 2 weeks, we'll be hosting what we call the Global Procurement Initiative, which is an opportunity for USTDA technical experts to provide training on procurement to focus more on best value as opposed to lowest cost. USTDA will be hosting a high-level Brazilian subnational government delegation to look at procurement specifically in the energy and transportation sectors, and they'll also visit a couple of U.S. cities for expertise, including Washington, D.C., New York, and Austin, Texas. On June 10th, we will be hosting a delegation focused on Latin America microgrid infrastructure, and this is I guess it's a quadrilateral, 4 different countries that are coming as part of the delegation from Brazil, Costa Rica, Panama, and Peru, and that will introduce these individuals to U.S. microgrid technologies, where they'll take a tour through Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Illinois, with a business briefing that U.S. companies can avail themselves of and attend on June 11th in Chicago. Starting on June 11th, we'll have a reverse trade mission for about a couple weeks focused with the nation of Turkey on live wire maintenance and repair, looking a little bit more specifically in the power sector, and to also provide training opportunities for them for live wire and maintenance repair. And then the last one I'll mention is starting on June 17th for about a week, and this is focused on the United States Indo-Pacific strategy with the Indo-Pacific liquefied natural gas supply and gas infrastructure reverse trade mission. And again, this is with 3 nations, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines out of the Indo-Pacific region, and they will be visiting Washington, D.C. and Houston, Texas. So that gives you kind of a bit of an overview of the work that USTDA does. I welcome you all to reach out. I know there will be contact information at the end of the slide, and I hope there's an opportunity for us to work together. I'd also like to take this moment to introduce Allison Germack, the Director of Corporate Development with one of our agency partners, OPIC, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. Allison, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Diane. And thanks to everyone dialing in by phone or online. It's a pleasure to be connected with all of you today. Again, my name is Allison Germack. I'm the Director of Corporate Development at an agency called the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, or also known by our acronym OPIC. By way of introduction, OPIC is the U.S. government agency tasked with mobilizing U.S. private capital for investments into emerging markets or developing countries. And when we say investments, really what we're referring to are business concerns that generate ongoing revenue streams. Those could be very large businesses, like infrastructure projects such as a wind farm or a water desalination plant, all the way down the spectrum to a very small business, maybe a processing facility that's processing cashews or cocoa, or maybe a cold storage operation. We facilitate these investments in emerging markets specifically. So we don't do business in higher income markets. We're very much focused on low income or middle income markets, and presently have financial exposure in about 90 markets. For those of you dialed in, you'll see a map on the screen. Those countries shaded in blue are the countries where we typically have the authority to operate. The financial support that we provide for these investments is namely loans and or insurance. And on the next slide, in just a minute, I'll walk you through very briefly what those products look like. But I'll emphasize here that the financial support that we provide to companies are fee-based products. So we do charge for our services, and by virtue of charging for our services, we're actually able to operate on a self-sustaining basis, which means we operate at no net cost to the American taxpayer. Next slide, please. There are three main products that OPIC offers, and I'm going to briefly profile each of the three. And then, of course, for those of you that are interested in getting further into the weeds, we have more detailed information available on our website. But the first product is debt financing, namely loans. So if you are looking at establishing a processing facility in a low-income market, or maybe you already have a processing facility constructed and you're looking for capital to grow it, to scale it, you're going to have certain significant costs associated with that endeavor. You may need to acquire land, construct a facility, purchase equipment. You'll need some working capital. And you may find it's very difficult to access commercial banking capital for these investments, right, where your collateral is going to be located overseas. And so OPIC basically steps in and fills that gap. We offer loans sized anywhere from about $1 million US dollars up to 250, 300, even $350 million. So very wide spectrum, working with very small businesses all the way up to those large infrastructure projects. And we specialize in offering longer tenors, which means longer repayment periods, anywhere from, in general, 5 to 20 years at a fixed rate. And again, it can be very difficult to find this kind of capital, which is often readily available in the United States, but very much limited in low-income and low-middle-income markets. The projects that are eligible for our support are going to be investment projects with typically a minimum of 25% ownership by U.S. persons or U.S. companies. So joint ventures between U.S. companies and local partners are certainly eligible for our support. Secondly, we offer political risk insurance. So if you as a U.S. investor or a U.S. company are contemplating an overseas project, either as an investor in that project or maybe as a contractor with equipment and personnel deployed overseas, you may have concerns about the political risk that your investment may be subject to operating in these markets. Risks like political violence, government expropriation or interference in the project, the ability to convert local currency into U.S. dollars or transfer local earnings back to the United States. These types of political risks can be mitigated through an insurance policy that OPIC supplies to the investor and is done so typically at a fixed premium. Again, from very small policies $1 million or less, all the way up into the hundreds of millions of dollars. And then the third product that we offer is a type of financing for investment funds. So for private equity fund managers that are out there in the market looking to raise a fund to invest in companies in a certain emerging market or a certain emerging market region and are interested in raising debt to be part of that fund, can also apply to OPIC for consideration of financing. Next slide, please. I often think examples are the best way to illustrate how our products can be utilized. And so very briefly on this slide, I have 3 companies profiled, all 3 of which would be considered small or mid-sized companies. The first is a company based out of California called Sambazon. If you like acai bowls or acai juice, you may have come across Sambazon's product in your grocery store. They have a processing facility in Brazil where they process the acai berries. OPIC provided financing to Sambazon a number of years ago to help them finance the construction of that facility. The second example is a company based in the Baltimore area of Maryland. Ellicott Dredges received OPIC insurance to help them mitigate the risk of doing work in the Middle Eastern region. And then thirdly, we have worked with a small business based in Oklahoma called Joshi Technologies. They are an oil and gas services company working in South America and also benefited from a small OPIC loan to help them engage in a contract in the market of Colombia more specifically. There are many more examples that I could point to, again, of all sizes and geographies. The best place for you to see those are by visiting our website, opic.gov, which is opic.gov. We have a section called OPIC in Action, where you can find all of our public information summaries for projects our agency has supported going back the last 10 years or so. Next slide, please. Finally, a bit of an update as to a significant change that our agency will be subject to in the forthcoming months. Last year, the President signed some legislation into law called the BUILD Act, B-U-I-L-D, and the BUILD Act is essentially modernizing the U.S. government's approach to development finance. And at its heart, what it entails is the creation of a new agency called the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, or for short, DFC. And DFC will include a merger of OPIC as well as a particular office at the U.S. Agency for International Development called Development Credit Authority, or DCA, which presently provides a local currency guarantee product. And so OPIC and DCA will merge together to form this new agency, which will additionally offer some new services. And those new services in particular include the authority to make equity investments overseas, the authority to provide support for technical assistance and feasibility studies, and a variety of other expanded capabilities, including a higher portfolio cap. Our current portfolio cap is about $29 billion, and our new cap will be a total of $60 billion, 60, so more than doubling. The new agency is scheduled to go live on October 1st, and you can, again, review our website or visit our website for updates as we progress closer to our launch date. And that brings me to the end of my slides. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce my government colleague, Maxwell Sarpong, who is the Supervisory Contracting Officer at one of our sister agencies, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or MCC. So over to you, Maxwell.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Maxwell Sarpong. I am the Director at the Millennium Challenge. My portfolio supports the Administration and Finance Department. Next slide, please. Established with bipartisan support in 2004, Our focus mandate was to reduce poverty through economic growth. As an agency, we go through a competitive selection process when we select a country. Each country is held up against 20 independent indicators. We look for countries that focus on low income and lower middle income countries. The focus is really ruling justly, economic freedom, and investing in people. So when we select a country, we look for countries that focus on results. We really try to empower countries that want to develop their own projects. We also hold the countries accountable because they're held accountable to tackling their own challenges. Next slide, please. As an agency, we focus on two types of grants. We have the compact grants and the threshold grants. Typically, our compact grants are 5-year grants. Our threshold grants are typically 2 to 3 years. So typically, the countries that meet our scorecard indicators normally get awarded the 5-year grants. The countries that meet some of our indicators, we typically award a 2 to 3 year threshold grant. Annually, we do about $500 million in procurement actions internationally. For the headquarter procurements, we do roughly about $70 million. And to find a lot of our opportunities internationally, we post a lot of our opportunities on DG Market, devbusiness.com. Our headquarter procurements are posted on FBO. We also use GWAX and other internal vehicles. Next slide, please. So why do business with MCC? Invoices are paid directly by U.S. Treasury to the contractor. The procurement process establishes a fair playing field. All money is available upfront. Winning contracts are based on price reasonableness and best value. International, environmental, and labor standards are enforced. How to do business with MCC. You have to compete for contracts, grants, and opportunities. We do post our opportunities on FBO, Dev Business. So we do post a lot of our opportunities. We utilize internal vehicles like BPAs, IDIQ contracts. We also use a lot of GWAC vehicles like NASA SOUP, GSA. We also post opportunities on FBO. We have interagency agreements as well that we use from time to time. We also post grants and cooperative agreements as well on grants.gov. Next slide, please. Okay, how are we doing in terms of small business goals? As you can see in FY17, we met a lot of our goals with the exception of 8A and HubZone. Those are areas that we can certainly find improvements in. So we're certainly aggressively looking to improve our numbers in the 8A awards and HubZone awards. But we are doing really well in other areas like small business, women-owned, service disabled, veteran-owned, and minority-owned businesses. Next slide, please. So how do you find opportunities at MCC? On our website, on mcc.gov, there's a part where you can go to work with us. And what we do is we post a lot of our business forecasts. We show you different opportunities that are coming up that will allow you to plan for opportunities. So we really try to make an effort to post all our business opportunities so that vendors can plan accordingly, reach out to the program offices for information. Feel free to reach out to the contracts department as well. Next slide, please. It's important that vendors stay engaged. We do a lot of our posting as far as business opportunities on our quarterly business forecast. So if you go to mcc.gov, select Work With Us, you'll see a lot of our opportunities that are coming out. We try to do a lot of outreach because what we found out is a lot of people haven't heard of MCC, so we try to do a lot of outreach as well. You can also subscribe on MCC's email list at mcc.gov/subscribe. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation, and I will hand it over to my colleague, Omari.
All right, thank you very much, Maxwell, and thank you to all of our speakers today. On the screen, I have a list of the previous webinars that were recorded as a part of this series. Our first webinar we conducted back on May 9th, Find Buyers, Finance Deals, and Get Paid, Managing Challenges in the Global Marketplace, Online Tools for Finding New Markets, and Opportunities in International Development. Now, I'd like to remind everyone listening that today's webinar will be recorded and available as well. So at the very top where you see the URL, the website where you logged in to get access to today's webinar, that's the same location where you will be able to go and find the recording and transcript of today's webinar. So in the future, if you have a colleague that was interested in the material that was discussed today but they weren't available, or if you were only able to dial in on the phone and you didn't see the material, feel free to always come back to this site to get more information or to listen to any of the previously recorded webinars that we did in this particular webinar series to, again, help you go global, help you expand your market, and again, making a positive difference in the world while you even grow your business. So at this point, we have reached the question and answer period. We received a few questions through our chat feature, so what we'll do is we'll address some of those questions we received through the chat line, and then we'll open it up to questions over the phone. So Diane, I have two questions for you that came through. First question is, how do U.S. companies learn about upcoming procurement opportunities that are occurring across the globe?
Great. Thank you for that question. And one of the best ways for you to learn about upcoming procurement opportunities is through our website. There is a section on our website that talks about procurements, and whenever we're looking for some of the subcontracting opportunities for the reverse trade missions that I mentioned earlier, you'll find those under the procurement section as well. So be sure to take a look at our website to stay tuned. And one of the other things that we do is we often share foreign tenders that we know are coming. We work closely with our friends at the Department of Commerce within the U.S. Commercial Service and the Foreign Commercial Service offices, and share some of the opportunities that are coming in, including from the Millennium Challenge Corporation and the State Department. So you can sign up for our email list and be updated. Whenever you look at the Connect With Us page, you'll see a number of different newsletters that will keep you up to date on what the current opportunities are in a variety of different sectors and regions of the world.
Thanks, Diane. So before I go to the next question, I'd like to remind everyone dialed into the webinar, on the screen now is all the contact information from all of the speakers today, including their website. So if someone, as Diane just mentioned, if you go to our website, please feel free to look at the information that's available on your screen. Diane, a second question is a bit of a multi-part question. Please provide guidance on how to find opportunities with USA aid, and how can a small minority-owned business or a small to medium-sized business work with the agency? Must the small to medium-sized business work with a large consulting firm that works with USAID? And then if so, how does your agency do any matchmaking with any contractors?
So it sounds like you were mentioning USAID.
Oh, I'm sorry, then that would be for Ned.
Yeah.
And I can feel that. So
I'm sorry, my apologies.
no. So the first question, generally, where to find more information about working with USAID. Our website is very accessible and very easy to navigate, usaid.gov. It's there on the link. We have a private sector engagement section that outlines a number of mechanisms to engage our private sector partners. We also outline it at areas where we are working, whether it's regional bureaus or actual functions and specific issues, global health, economic growth, etc. Specific to the small business and other business sectors, we host an office for small and disadvantaged businesses. We can connect you to that. So if you have a specific inquiry you want to make into the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Businesses, please reach out to me. I will happily make that introduction, and my contact information is on the slide. Further, again, with the new partnership initiative, if there's a connection we can make there for you, depending on what the product is or what the service is, happy to kind of vet that with you. If you have a concept that's more germane to our U.S. Global Development Lab, and once again, happy to make that introduction. So not saying I am the only one-stop shop, but for this webinar's purpose, happy to field your interest. Otherwise, the USAID.gov, very accessible with points of contact for each office. If it's a concept or something you're looking to scale or test in the field, I would point you to the U.S. Global Development Lab. If it's a specific small business product or service, the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Businesses or our Economic Growth Bureau's Trade and Regulatory Reform Office also has a great number of resources for businesses of all size. As far as working with a consultant, I believe was the third part of that question.
Yes.
No, you can certainly just reach out to us directly. We are open for business. No third parties necessarily are necessary.
Great. Thanks, Ned, for that. So this question is actually for any one of our speakers, and I'll somewhat combine these two questions into one. So one entity said that they are a CPA and they're a small business owner, and they're looking for different types of either funding or technical assistance that they could receive from one of the you all's agencies. But also another part of that question, which I think ties together, is someone mentioned that these seem to be companies, or we're talking about companies with a mature product that is already either in the U.S. market, but what about the potential that exists overseas? And how could a company that's just looking to find out about different opportunities, how do you all have any recommendations for them? So those are two questions I'm trying to combine into one.
I know there's some silence here on the phone among our speakers. This is Diane from USTDA. I'll just jump in here in terms of companies with a mature market and mature products. One thing I'd like to just say is I think it's really worthwhile, at least from USTDA's stance, to always be looking at our website and looking at under our contract awards and upcoming procurement section. One of the things that came out in our agency's strategic planning last year is that small businesses are really the hotbed of innovation here in the United States, and there are all sorts of innovative products and services that are coming out here that make a lot of sense for use overseas. For example, there are parts of the globe that will never have landline telephones, but we're able to jump straight to cell phones. The other thing I would say is that I think it makes a lot of sense for those that are listening in who might have a product that's been sitting on the shelf or a service for a few years to consider overseas markets, because what may have been a version 1 here in the United States is now on version 20 in a very competitive U.S. market. That might be the best thing since sliced bread in a low or middle income nation with emerging markets that are just starting to look at these technologies, looking at, cleaner emissions in some of these foreign countries. That's technology that's been here in the U.S. since the 1980s, but is brand new for some of these overseas markets. So definitely take a look at the technologies and services that you offer right now, because that could be, the next best solution in a foreign market that's just emerging in that field. And I'll open it up to some of the other speakers. I don't want to hog all the time.
Cool. Well, what we'll do is, for sake of time, we do have another question. Thank you for that great answer. So again, if any of the other speakers have any additional comments to that, please feel free to jump in, possibly during another question. But I do have a question for Ned, and what we'll do after this question, we'll then open it up to the phone line. So Ned, question for you is, what guidance would you give to possibly a solar microgrid company interested in the Power Africa initiative? And also, what countries are a priority in sub-Sahara Africa?
Great question. So, excellent question. And I cannot share the media through our WebEx platform, but pointing you to another link, usa.gov/PowerAfrica. It provides some excellent background information about where we're working, where we're tracking connections, and where to engage. It also has a wonderful video sort of summarizing Africa 1.0 and into 2.0, the next stage of this interagency initiative. As far as countries we are working in, Sub-Saharan Africa, everything includes South Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, the DRC, across West Africa, Madagascar. We're tracking over 900 transactions already, and that might even be an out-of-date statistic because it's constantly being updated. We have 60 million new electricity connections, so things we're looking towards 60 million new energy connections. So there's a lot of work to be done. But as far as engaging, again, we have a link on that part of the website about becoming a partner. There is an email address to specifically email your interest to. I can note that if you copy me, I will ensure that it gets to the right person. But that is interest we would certainly be interested in discussing a bit further and offline.
Great, thanks, Ned. So at this point, we're going to open it up for questions over the phone to see if anyone has anything additional in addition to what we received through the chat. So, operator, can you please provide instructions on anyone that would like to ask a question over the phone?
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1, unmute your phone, and record your name clearly. Your name is required to introduce your question. If you need to withdraw your question, press star 2. Again, to ask a question, please press star 1. As a reminder, you are allowed one question, limited to one follow-up question. It will take a few moments for the questions to come through. Please stand by.
All right, and while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I will ask a question of Diane. One question for you. How can U.S. companies learn about upcoming procurement? Oh, actually, I already did that question.
That's okay. If we have a minute, one of the things I wanted to mention in my presentation is that USTDA has a program that we run here called Making Global Local, and we're always looking for multiplier organizations across the country, chambers of commerce, world trade centers, even state economic development authorities or local economic development authorities to work with so that we can share our information about upcoming reverse trade missions. But we really consider it a two-way pipeline. It's an opportunity for those multiplier organizations to share with us burgeoning industries in their local area that are ripe for export. So we really rely on the information coming in from the field. So if you're from an area of the country and you don't feel like there's a good multiplier organization or we can be better connected, certainly do let us know that. And reach out, and we'll look at what we can do to better connect to your section of the country. And with that, I'll be quiet again.
No, thanks, Diane, very much for that. Operator, do we have any questions?
Yes, our first question is from Don. Go ahead, your line is open.
Hi, I have a question in regards to the potential opportunities in the environmental and historic preservation area. I don't know in what country, but are there opportunities in those areas? Hello?
So Ned here from USAID. I'll see if I can field that. As far as historic preservation, that's something I admittedly do not know off the top of my head. Would have to do a little bit of investigating internally. I would note as far as environmental, we have our E3 Bureau, which is Economic Growth education, and environment focused would have some prospective opportunities. I encourage you to go online and take a look at what some of the program offerings are, where we're engaged, where we're working, and see if there's a specific area where you think you can contribute to, and follow up accordingly.
Okay. One more question for you. In regards to the slides, how will I get access to the slides so I can make sure I can get everyone's information?
Right, so they will be available. They'll be posted in a few days. So again, as I mentioned, I'll pull it up right here. The URL here, if you go where you logged in today, where you got that information, if you go back there in a few days, you will see the recording and everything that was done today. That's where it will be posted.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Operator, do we have any other questions? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Our next question is from Melissa. Go ahead, your line is open.
Hi, thank you so much for this great presentation. My question is specifically directed at OPIC, but any of the other speakers can respond to this. As it relates to consultancy opportunities, specifically in the Latin America and the Caribbean area, I know there's been a huge intentionality by OPIC to travel into the Caribbean regions and to try to explore to see where we can kind of increase investments. How do consultants get engaged and be a part of that? Is there a supply diversity for OPIC? I guess it's better.
Sure. Thanks for your question, Melissa. Generally speaking, the way consultants typically get engaged is by engaging directly with our clients or our prospective clients. So where our clients may require the assistance of a consultant or an advisor to help them refine their business plan, update a market study, better assess the technical capabilities of a particular technology solution, that engagement generally happens directly between the client and the consultant, and then our interaction is predominantly with the client. In terms of how you can be made aware of these different opportunities, we generally don't engage directly in matchmaking, but we do organize a number of events throughout the year to engage with the private sector, to inform prospective clients about our service offerings. And those events are open, obviously, both to prospective clients as well as people that work in support areas like consultancies and advisory. So one of the things you may consider doing is signing up on our website for our newsletter to be made aware when we have these different opportunities, because they're great venues at which to engage with people that may be considering applying for OPIC assistance.
Okay. I guess one more question. So how do we, if we wanted to provide consultancy for OPIC specifically, like if we have experience in the Caribbean region and kind of connecting with those stakeholders there, how do we provide consultancy for OPIC?
Sure. So in terms of providing consultancy directly to OPIC, when we do engage consultants, it's typically through a procurement process, and you can find those opportunities typically on fedbizops.gov if you're familiar with that website.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Before we just take the next question, I just wanted to let everyone know on the phone that Ned from USAID had a hard stop. So if there were any additional questions for Ned from USAID, his number and contact information is available on the slide. So if you have any questions related to him, please feel free to reach out to him directly. So just want to give that disclaimer as we continue with the questions. Operator, do we have any other questions?
Yes, our next question is from Silvio. Go ahead, your line is open.
Hey guys, thank you for organizing this meeting. I was not able to view it from my mobile. I requested a desktop, and I'm currently mobile. It should be great to be able to download that link a little bit later. As far as the question is related, when we do understand that groups like OPIC can come in for funding and financing once the projects are a bit off the ground. But on the technical side, there is sometimes the need to update feasibility studies. but then some of the soft development costs at the early stage of the outset of the project that's missing to round out the ability to get it to bankability. Could you maybe address what organizations are most appropriate to tap for helping round out some of the soft capital costs before it's bankable for a group like OPIC? That includes maybe, in the case of existing projects, updating feasibility studies, and in the case of new greenfield projects, sometimes just rounding out the soft costs that are needed for perhaps some final permitting that's necessary or required. I was thinking something like USAID from a rearview mirror perspective, but now with the new organization that's going to be set up after October 1st, perhaps that's a new route. Maybe you could add some perspective to that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. This is Allison with OPIC. And I'll also invite Diane to chime in as well with respect to the capabilities offered through TDA. But as far as OPIC is concerned, at this point, we don't have a specific funding window for feasibility studies. And you're correct that typically at the point of approaching OPIC with an application for our project financing, a lot of the preparatory assessment work will have been completed. In the new agency, the Development Finance Corporation that's scheduled to launch on October 1st, we are now mandated to offer a technical assistance or grant product that theoretically could be used to support those project preparatory costs. We're still very early in the transition, and so we're still fleshing out what the parameters of such a program might look like. But I would encourage you to stay tuned, because our hope is that in the next couple of weeks we'll have more details we can share about what our program offerings in that respect will look like through the DFC. But Diane, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add from your perspective from TDA, as TDA is often playing that role of providing that support to a project developer as they have eyes on looking at OPIC or Exim Bank as a project finance implementer.
Right. So the feasibility studies are a good portion of the project preparation tools that we offer here at USTDA. And whenever we do, whenever we're looking for contractors to assist with our feasibility studies, that will be on our FedBizOps website, on that section of our website, and you'll see it under, we actually have a link for how to become a USTDA contractor with additional information if you look at opportunities with USTDA on our website. In terms of the differences in the feasibility studies, I do know that OPIC under the new DFC will have an option to perform a feasibility studies. However, there's a key difference in that USTDA, by congressional mandate, must offer feasibilities that are solely focused on majority export potential for U.S. products, services, or technology. So that's really where our focus is. I think OPIC will have a little bit of latitude to cover that territory that is not as much export focused. And in terms of any updates to our feasibility studies, or to have a sense of when they're coming, one kind of tool to take a look at is our press releases. Whenever we do grant signings, we will do a press release that will talk about grants being signed in a certain area. So that will give you a sense of timing, such as kind of a little tool that you can use on our website to track where we're starting to do business with grant signings and what those grant signings are for, and if they're for feasibility studies or DEF studies or definitional missions. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So that does. Thank you. So we have to apply to USTDA as an agent, or we have to register on the website before we're able to use any of those tools?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of information on our website about project proposals, eligibility checklists, how to do, what the guidelines are for sole source projects, contact information, grant documents, etc. So yeah, I really advise you to take a careful look at USTDA.gov and go under the business opportunities section.
Wonderful. Okay.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Diane. Go ahead, your line is open. Hello, Diane. Your question. You can ask your question. Our next question is from O Chen. Go ahead, your line is open.
Hello?
We're here. Go ahead and ask your question. Hello? Sir, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Well, my question is primarily, I'm from a region of the state of Carolina who just opened a port, and we are looking to facilitate exchange between an African Sub-Saharan nation of exports in agricultural products. And I'm looking to find out what kind of support might exist between these two countries that exchange agricultural goods and products from that standpoint, and how we could facilitate access to those, since it's in its early development for the exchange of agricultural goods.
So for USTDA, I'll just offer up that we really focus more on infrastructure projects. We don't do so much in agriculture, so I don't know if there's anybody else among our speakers that might want to answer this one.
Hi,
Yes.
Diane. It's Allison. With respect to OPIC, generally where we get involved would be on the exporter side. So to the extent that there is, an African producer that's looking for financing to, grow their operation, their production operation, their processing operation, what have you, we could look at the different financing options we have available to support that. To the extent, though, that what you're looking for is, some guidance or some support for, the formation of a relationship between, the U.S. counterparty and the African producer, those conversations might be, better suited by, one of our trade agency colleagues, potentially, with the U.S. Department of Commerce, or maybe with the Foreign Agricultural Service, to the extent that there's an expectation of exporting from the U.S. But I don't know if anyone else among our speakers may have a comment that they'd like to add to mine.
I would also like to add, this is Omari Wooden, the moderator. So we did a webinar in the series for the first one talking about finding buyers, where we talked about different opportunities with the Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Service to help assist with some of those types of partnerships. So my recommendation is to take a look at that webinar. There are a lot of points of contact in that webinar series, and then I would recommend you reach out to some of them to get more details specified to your specific topic.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Show no further questions at this time.
All right, we received 2 questions very quickly. I'd like to go over with the speakers, and then we'll close unless there are any additional questions through these chats. One question that came up, and this is probably for everybody, and this may also be a question for Ned. So I'll ask the question, but I will also remind the person that asked the question that in particular where Ned focused on the coordinated efforts in Africa, Ned may be the best point of contact, but I'll go ahead and ask the question. So if I am in the market or I am exporting medicine and vitamins to Africa, is there any advice or recommendations that you can provide? Diane or Allison, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is Diane. And again, we focus largely on infrastructure. We don't do so much within healthcare.
Gotcha. So to the person that asked this particular question, my recommendation is Ned talked about efforts that they were doing specifically in Africa. Their contact information is here listed on the slide with his direct number. I recommend that you give him a call since he discussed different outreach efforts that are going on in Africa. So that would be my recommendation for that. Another question that we had received, wanted to review information on the reverse trade missions to Chicago from Brazil, Panama, Peru, and Costa Rica. Who would I contact for reverse trade missions?
Sure, that's here at USTDA, and there was a link that I had within my presentation that pointed to our upcoming events. All of our reverse trade missions and business briefings, any conferences or trainings or workshops that we may be hosting overseas will be posted on that upcoming events link. So that's a Latin America microgrid infrastructure that they're referring to, and that business briefing is on June 11th in Chicago. So just make sure that when you look on the upcoming events, you'll see it there. And I hope that answers your question, and we hope to see you there.
Yep, and just to help answer with that question, now on the slide, the person that had that question talks about the reverse trade missions with the upcoming events listed on the slide as well. And again, keep in mind to all those on the phone or still connected, everything that is being recorded and this presentation will be available on the website shortly within a few days. So you can always access that information again. So at this point, I'm going to pull back up the slide with all of our contact information. I would like to thank again all of our speakers today. I would like to thank our experts from U.S. Agency in International Development, our Overseas Private Investment Corporation, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation for their time and expertise on today's webinar. Again, this is the end of the World Trade Month webinar series. All the webinars that were previously recorded are available at the URL listed here on the website. Again, feel free to go back into those particular recordings to learn more about some of the topics that, again, may be able to answer some of your questions that we weren't able to answer today. I'd like to thank everyone involved today. I'd like to thank the team that helped put this webinar together. I'd like to thank all of you that attended, and we look forward to seeing you in the future, and we hope this series will help you expand your sales globally. Thank you very much.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time. Speakers, please allow a moment of silence and stand by for your post-conference.